Mr. Bookman here. Before I go ahead and start today's audiobook, do me one small favor. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel. And if you like today's book, make sure you do give it a thumbs up. Also, check out the comments for discussions. But more importantly, make sure you look in the description. You're going to see a link in there that's going to give you access to over 200 ebooks. Now let's dive right into today's book.
Speech, February 1842, Boston. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Charles Dickens' 200th Anniversary Collection, Volume 1. Speech, February 1842, Boston, by Charles Dickens. At dinner given to Mr. Dickens by the young men of Boston. The company consisted of about 200, among whom were George Bancroft, Washington Allston, and Oliver Wendell Holmes. The toast of health, happiness, and a hearty welcome to Charles Dickens, having been proposed by the chairman, Mr. Quincy, and received with great applause, Mr. Dickens responded with the following address. Gentlemen, if you had given this splendid entertainment to any one else in the whole wide world, if I were tonight to exult in the triumph of my dearest friend, if I stood here upon my defense to repel any unjust attack, to appeal as a stranger to your generosity and kindness as the freest people on the earth, I could, putting some restraint upon myself, stand among you as self-possessed and unmoved as I should be alone in my own room in England. But when I have the echoes of your cordial greeting ringing in my ears, when I see your kind faces beaming a welcome so warm and earnest as never man had, I feel it is my nature, so vanquished and subdued, that I have hardly fortitude enough to thank you. If your president, instead of pouring forth that delightful mixture of humor and pathos which you have just heard, had been but a caustic, ill-natured man, if he had only been a dull one, if I could only have doubted or distrusted him or you, I should have had my wits at my fingers' ends, and using them, could have held you at arm's length. But you have given me no such opportunity. You take advantage of me in the tenderest point. You give me no chance of playing at company or holding you at a distance, but flock about me like a host of brothers, and make this place like home. Indeed, gentlemen, indeed, if it be natural and allowable for each of us, on his own hearth, to express his thoughts in the most homely fashion, and to appear in his plainest garb, I have a fair claim upon you to let me do so tonight, for you have made my home an Aladdin's palace. You fold so tenderly within your breasts that common household lamp in which my feeble fire is all enshrined, and at which my flickering torch is lighted up, that straight my household gods take wing, and are transported there. And whereas it is written of that fairy structure that it never moved without two shocks, one when it rose, and one when it settled down, I can say of mine that, however sharp a tug it took to pluck it from its native ground, it struck at once an easy and a deep and lasting root into this soil, and loved it as its own. I can say more of it, and say with truth, that long before it moved, or had a chance of moving, its master, perhaps from some secret sympathy between its timbers and a certain stately tree that had its being hereabout and spread its broad branches far and wide, dreamed by day and night for years of setting foot upon this shore and breathing this pure air. And trust me, gentlemen, that if I had wandered here, unknowing and unknown, I would, if I know my own heart, have come with all my sympathies clustering as richly about this land and people, with all my sense of justice as keenly alive to their high claims on every man who loves God's image, with all my energies as fully bent on judging for myself, and speaking out and telling in my sphere the truth, as I do now, when you rain down your welcomes on my head. Our President has alluded to those writings which have been my occupation for some years past, and you have received his allusions in a manner which assures me, if I needed any such assurance, that we are old friends in the spirit, and have been in close communion for a long time. It is not easy for a man to speak of his own books. I dare say that few persons have been more interested in mine than I, and if it be a general principle in nature that a lover's love is blind, and that a mother's love is blind, I believe it may be said of an author's attachment to the creatures of his own imagination, that it is a perfect model of constancy and devotion, and is the blindest of all. But the objects and purposes I have had in view are very plain and simple, and may be easily told. I have always had, and always shall have, an earnest and true desire to contribute, as far as in me lies, to the common stock of healthful cheerfulness and enjoyment. I have always had, and always shall have, an invincible repugnance to that mole-eyed philosophy which loves the darkness, and winks and scowls in the light. I believe that virtue shows quite as well in rags and patches as she does in purple and fine linen. I believe that she, and every beautiful object in external nature, claims some sympathy in the breast of the poorest man who breaks his scanty loaf of daily bread. I believe that she goes barefoot as well as shod. I believe that she dwells rather oftener in alleys and byways than she does in courts and palaces, and that it is good and pleasant and profitable to track her out and follow her. I believe that to lay one's hand upon some of those rejected ones whom the world has too long forgotten and too often misused, and to say to the proudest and most thoughtless, "These creatures have the same elements and capacities of goodness as yourselves. They are molded in the same form and made of the same clay, and though 10 times worse than you, may, in having retained anything of their original nature amidst the trials and distresses of their condition, be really 10 times better." I believe that to do this is to pursue a worthy and not useless vocation. Gentlemen, that you think so too, your fervent greeting sufficiently assures me. That this feeling is alive in the Old World as well as in the New, no man should know better than I who have found such wide and ready sympathy in my own dear land. That in expressing it we are but treading in the steps of those great master spirits who have gone before, we know by reference to all the bright examples in our literature, from Shakespeare downward. There is one other point connected with the labors, if I may call them so, that you hold in such generous esteem, to which I cannot help adverting. I cannot help expressing the delight, the more than happiness it was to me to find so strong an interest awakened on this side of the water in favor of that little heroine of mine, to whom your President has made allusion, who died in her youth. I had letters about that child, in England, from the dwellers in log houses among the morasses, and swamps, and densest forests, and deep solitudes of the far west. Many a sturdy hand, hard with the axe and spade, and browned by the summer's sun, has taken up the pen, and written to me a little history of domestic joy or sorrow, always coupled, I am proud to say, with something of interest in that little tale, or some comfort or happiness derived from it, and my correspondent has always addressed me, not as a writer of books for sale, resident some 4,000 or 5,000 miles away, but as a friend to whom he might freely impart the joys and sorrows of his own fireside. Many a mother, I could reckon them now by dozens, not by units, has done the like, and has told me how she lost such a child at such a time, and where she lay buried, and how good she was, and how, in this or that respect, she resembles Nell. I do assure you that no circumstance of my life has given me 1/100th part of the gratification I have derived from this source. I was wavering at the time whether or not to wind up my clock and come and see this country, and this decided me. Footnote: Master Humphrey's Clock, under which title the 2 novels of Barnaby Rudge and the Old Curiosity Shop originally appeared. Editor. End footnote. I felt as if it were a positive duty, as if I were bound to pack up my clothes and come and see my friends, and even now I have such an odd sensation in connection with these things that you have no chance of spoiling me. I feel as though we were agreeing, as indeed we are, if we substitute for fictitious characters the classes from which they are drawn, about third parties in whom we had a common interest. At every new act of kindness on your part, I say to myself, "That's for Oliver." I should not wonder if that was meant for Smike. I have no doubt that is intended for Nell. And so I become a much happier, certainly, but a more sober and retiring man than ever I was before. Gentlemen, talking of my friends in America brings me back, naturally and of course, to you. Coming back to you, and being thereby reminded of the pleasure we have in store in hearing the gentlemen who sit about me, I arrive by the easiest, though not by the shortest course in the world, at the end of what I have to say. But before I sit down, there is one topic on which I am desirous to lay particular stress. It has, or should have, a strong interest for us all, since to its literature every country must look for one great means of refining and improving its people, and one great source of national pride and honor. You have in America great writers, who will live in all time, and are as familiar to our lips as household words. Deriving, as they all do in a greater or less degree in their several walks, their inspiration from the stupendous country that gave them birth, they diffuse a better knowledge of it, and a higher love for it, all over the civilized world. I take leave to say, in the presence of some of these gentlemen, that I hope the time is not far distant when they, in America, will receive of right some substantial profit in return in England from their labors, and when we in England shall receive some substantial profit in return in America for ours. Pray do not misunderstand me. Securing to myself from day to day the means of an honorable subsistence, I would rather have the affectionate regard of my fellow men than I would have heaps and mines of gold. But the two things do not seem to me incompatible. They cannot be, for nothing good is incompatible with justice. There must be an international arrangement in this respect. England has done her part, and I am confident that the time is not far distant when America will do hers. It becomes the character of a great country, firstly, because it is justice; secondly, because without it you never can have and keep a literature of your own. Gentlemen, I thank you with feelings of gratitude such as are not often awakened and can never be expressed. As I understand it to be the pleasant custom here to finish with a toast, I would beg to give you America and England, and may they never have any division but the Atlantic between them. End of speech, February 1842, Boston. Read by Laurie Ann Walden.
Mr. Bookman here. I hope you enjoyed today's audiobook. Don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and go ahead and tell us what you thought about the book in the comments. But more importantly, don't forget to check out the description. It's got a link in there that's going to give you access to over 200 ebooks. And we'll see you next time. And remember, you are appreciated.